The Ukrainian armed forces are fiercely dismantling the 112th Guards Rocket Brigade of the Russian Federation. In a minute, you will see these unique shots. These are the very guards who delivered a deadly strike on the peaceful residents of Sumy on Palm Sunday. And once again, Crimea has been shaken. New Ukrainian UAVs are in action. At least the Russian Ministry of Murders reports Crimea was attacked by new aircraft-type drones. They are also called unmanned bombers. Meanwhile, Putin's soldiers are acting on the principle of hit your own so that others fear you. Imagine, at least 8 aerial bombs were dropped by Russian planes on the Belgorod region since April 11th. One of the villages was attacked twice. All the details. Let's watch.
Revenge did not take long. These are the shots of the shelling of the 112th Guards Missile Brigade.
Look!
This is the very brigade that was killing Ukrainians in the city of Sumy on Sunday. Well, here's your answer.
I almost gave birth. Ha! I got goosebumps!
Interestingly, the Russians spared air defense for such an object, and they are unsuccessfully trying to shoot down the UAVs with rifles. As they say, air defense in Russia is only for the chosen ones, and the drones, as you can see, are hitting the target precisely. Let us remind you that earlier, the Ukrainian armed forces struck the permanent deployment point of the 448th Missile Brigade of the occupiers in the Kursk region, who are also involved in attacks on Sumy. And at this time, Crimea also trembled. The Ministry of Murders in Russia claims that Crimea was attacked by 2 aircraft-type UAVs. And by the way, deep state analysts claim that the Ukrainian armed forces have started using the latest Ukrainian ultralight UAVs, the B-1 aviation complexes, at the front.
The B-1 UAVs are light bombers designed to destroy personnel, vehicles, and armored equipment. In addition, it should be noted that these UAVs can destroy the specified targets, both at the front line and in the enemy's rear. According to the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, these drones can carry various types of munitions, and most importantly, they are equipped with powerful low-noise engines that allow these UAVs to stay airborne for several hours. In addition, the B-1 has increased resistance to electronic warfare systems.
Moreover, the Ukrainian army is repelling a daring enemy attack in the Novopavlovsk direction. As you can see, the Russians are launching an attack with more than 24 armored vehicles, several tanks and more than 12.5 BMPs with infantry. But all of this was shattered to pieces, along with the enemy's infantry. And while the Ukrainian armed forces strike the enemy, the Russians strike their own, as they say, to make others fear. At least 8 aerial bombs have been dropped by Russian planes on the Belgorod region since April 11th. One of the villages was attacked twice.
Since the beginning of 2025, according to estimates from the Russian side itself, there have been at least 59 incidents of unintended bomb drops, including 44 FABs and 7 UMPBs, as well as 3 missiles falling from Russian planes on both Russian territory and temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. This is evidence that the Russian Federation is effectively facing the issue of lacking the capability for modernization and current major repairs of the aircraft of the Russian aerospace forces due to sectoral sanctions from the United States and EU countries.
Additionally, North Korea continues to assist the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin in his aggressive war against Ukraine. According to Reuters, over the past 2 years, North Korea has sent the Kremlin about 16,000 containers with ammunition.
It should be noted that North Korea supplies the Russian Federation not only with artillery shells. Let me emphasize once again, according to the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, this amounts to about 4 million artillery shells. But accordingly, we are talking about the supply of KN-23 tactical ballistic missiles. Plus, accordingly, there are strike drones. In addition, the North Korean side also supplies, accordingly, Koksan 170mm self-propelled artillery and other types of military equipment.
And you remember that North Korea helps Russia not only with ammunition but also sends its cannon fodder to the war.
And also, you know, Moscow has been at the bottom for more than 3 years now. The fact is that on April 14th, 2022, our defense forces sent the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, the cruiser Moskva, underwater. It was the greatest shipwide of the Russians, becoming their most costly loss. What remains of the Moskva at the bottom of the sea? What remnants have Ukrainian scientists managed to retrieve over 3 years? And how much more Russian military junk will follow this Russian warship? TSN correspondent Olena Hushchik will tell more.
The most powerful and astonishing.
The most powerful ship of the Black Sea Fleet with a satellite system and supersonic missiles on board. A battlecruiser where leaders of different countries have met multiple times. It also has its own headquarters and even an air defense system. In general, the pride and symbol of the Russian Federation, which, as befits a symbol, went to the bottom of the Black Sea.
To the bottom of the Black Sea.
The cruiser Moskva. It was the defense forces on Snake Island that sent it on its well-known course. The ship ended its journey 3 years ago when it was hit on April 13th and sank on the 14th.
This, in my opinion, I think, was the most powerful, the most technologically advanced ship of the Black Sea Fleet since 1982.
The value of the Moskva was estimated at $750 million. It was essentially a floating air defense system, thanks to which the Russians controlled the entire space over the Black Sea. The destruction of the Moskva allowed for the liberation of Snake Island and the unblocking of shipping trade routes.
It was used as a command ship. That is, it could actually accommodate about 50 to 60 staff officers, and they could manage the ship's aviation and marines. For this, it had special equipment.
How many sailors died on board is unknown. The sunken cruiser continued to send greetings and signals for a long time, as civilian sailors found rusty oars and leaky life rafts in the middle of the sea. Probably out of the 5,000 Russian crew, someone did try to swim out, although Mr. Andrei is sure it was difficult for them even before the arrival of the missiles.
The weather was stormy with dark clouds looming overhead, heavy rain and strong winds. A significant number of the crew unfortunately simply got seasick. None of the air defense systems were working, and those missiles just hit the ship.
Thus, the monster of the Black Sea turned into a broken plastic toy, unwanted in the middle of the Black Sea. Although even from the bottom, it has already acquired a new status. Officially, the underwater cultural heritage of Ukraine. The Russian warship became famous in March with a record 1 million copy circulation. It spawned hundreds of now historic memes, became the hero of exhibitions, museums, and films. All with the main thesis, Ukraine built the Moskva, Ukraine burned it, and now Ukraine is studying it. After all, the cruiser was built in Mykolaiv. Gradually in parts, the flagship is now being resurrected in a Ukrainian museum. These are the remnants of the legendary Moskva, which our sea washed ashore. A life buoy, a signal buoy, and also the remnants of the Neptune missile, which sent the ship to the bottom by all laws. They are now being studied by Ukrainian scientists.
And here the Guard missile cruisers, such as the well-known... And here the Guard missile cruisers, the specific number 121 at that time was carried only by the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, the missile cruiser Moskva. So this is an original item, this is a real item, this is an item from the missile cruiser Moskva.
In the Central Naval Museum of Ukraine, they also know the exact coordinates of the sunken Moskva. Director Sergei Voronov says the depth there is about 50 meters. This means that it will definitely be possible to retrieve many interesting items from there. The flagship itself is large, so even beginner divers will be able to descend and see it at least from above. Moreover, the Moskva conveniently sank near ancient ships and already modern wrecks of the Russian fleet.
This is the one of the 3,000 sunken ships that we know of, which lie in the waters of Ukraine and are on our records. Most of them are not sunk but damaged. For example, the Saratov, a large landing ship that was destroyed in Berdyansk, we did not record because it practically did not sink. It ran aground.
There are plenty of exhibits for scientists on the seabed. Then, in the 2 years following the cruiser Moskva, Ukrainian defenders sent at least 6 landing ships to the bottom. The largest of them are the Olenegorsky Gornyak, Minsk, Novocherkassk, and Caesar Kunikov. The submarine Rostov-on-Don, a missile boat, several patrol ships, and even a naval minesweeper also went to the bottom with their entire cargo. In the year 24, the defense forces somewhat hastened the squadron's departure from Crimea when the ATAC MS strike the missile ship Cyclone. After this, the Magura drones finish off the smaller boats one by one, and finally, the General Staff report states 29 Russian naval units destroyed. Can we say it like that? 15 serious ships remain, for example.
Well, about 12 are frigates, which are precisely the missile carriers. These are corvettes, missile corvettes, and a few landing ships remain.
Ukraine has finally driven the Black Sea Fleet out of the Crimean bases and did so not only without its own fleet, experts say. It continues to adhere to the strategy of primarily destroying what is used to launch missiles, deploy troops, and where ammunition is hidden.
We drove the enemy out of the northwestern part of the Black Sea, lifted the blockade from our ports, and launched maritime cargo flow to our ports.
In Sevastopol, only damaged ships remain at the moment, which the Ukrainians occasionally send back for repairs. Due to a lack of forces, the Russians have relocated the base of the surviving ships to Novorossiysk. From there, missile carriers are still taken out to sea under full cover of patrols and helicopters. And the most valuable assets are hidden in harbors under the protection of a dozen Russian air defenses. Of course, there are still many monsters in those ports capable of handling the most powerful combat missions. The occupiers are tirelessly looking for loopholes to protect them. However, our naval forces are acting proactively and know exactly how, where, and when the entire Black Sea Fleet will go to the bottom.
And now an analysis of the operational situation on the Huliaipol and Orikhiv fronts. The enemy continues its military terror. In the Huliaipol direction, enemy aviation struck Huliaipol with unguided aerial rockets. In the Pridniprovsk direction, the terrorist country struck Kherson with caps. In the Orikhiv direction, Ukrainian defenders repelled an enemy attack near Mala Tokmachka. Stepne, Lukyanivske, and Kamyansky also came under airstrikes. And this week, all of Ukraine mourned the victims of the brutal strike by Russian terrorists on Sumy. I remind you, on Palm Sunday, Putin's ballistic missile killed 35 innocent people. Among the dead were 2 children. The Kremlin fiends killed the entire Martynenko family, the father, mother, and their 11-year-old son, Maxim. More about this horror in the next chilling report from our colleagues at the television news service.
Today in Sumy, they are saying goodbye to the Martynenko family, the father, mother, and their 11-year-old son, Maxim. They died on Palm Sunday while they were on their way to church for a service. In the hall of the Protestant church that the family attended, there are dozens of photographs of the deceased. Always smiling, happy, united, that's how they are remembered here.
Positive. They always had a smile on their face.
I knew him. He was interested in football and Minecraft. Cheerful, kind.
He was located.
They were at that spot at that moment on Petropavlovskaya, not far from here, when those missiles, those Iskanders, arrived.
The family lived in an old village not far from Sumy. The boy was interested in football. During the attack, the family was near the site of the first strike, eyewitnesses say. When they were running to shelter, the Russians launched a second strike with a cluster munition missile which took their lives.
In the 21st century,
this should not be happening. To ensure humanity doesn't die in such matters, we must simply shout, we must publicize this. Because if we remain silent, as Jesus said, the stones will cry out.
As a result of the Russian attack, 35 people died. 127 were injured. 32 victims are still in hospitals, including 6 children. 6 patients are in intensive care. Among the severely injured is 1 child. As a result of the explosions, let me remind you, more than 50 buildings were damaged. More than 1,000 broken windows have already been covered with plywood sheets. Roof repairs are ongoing. Utility workers and rescuers have been clearing debris and removing structures of destroyed buildings for the 4th day in a row. The street hit by Russian missiles is still closed off. They promise to restore traffic on it by tomorrow.
But now it's time to analyze the operational situation on the blazing Pokrovsk front line. The Russian world continues to destroy, kill, and maim here as well. On the Pokrovsk front, since the beginning of the day, Russian occupiers have made 48 attempts to dislodge our soldiers from their positions. In the areas of the settlements of Sukaya Balka, Staraya Nikolaevka и Zelenoi Pole, Vodyanoi Vtoroe, Yelizavetovka, Novotoretskoye, Romen, Lisovka, Kotlino, Uspenovka, Preobraženko, and Andreevka. The defense forces are holding back the onslaught and have already repelled 45 attacks. 3 clashes are still ongoing. Enemy aviation also struck Malinovka with guided aerial bombs.